Right, this one.
Hello, Fiona.
Hello.
Oh, I've got my little coffee mug as well. Much smaller.
Got the orange one today.
It's very good. So we're doing a coffee break. Uh, Remind our listeners again of the format for the coffee break.
Freestyle. No,
Because all our other
coffee.
talks are so structured and we never go off
I know
topic.
how funny. Yes. And
Yeah.
even when we do think about them, last week when we talked about the holidays, that was the one I had thought most about, when we were recording. I was like, oh, no.
Oh, tangents.
Yeah, exactly. Went off and talk about something else.
Yeah.
Coffee breaks are every fifth. Um, not including, well, so the last one was episode 6, and this is episode 11. And it's when one of us doesn't know what we're going to be talking about. The other one has prepared some questions for them. Last time I prepared questions for you. This time you prepared questions for me that I'm hiding behind my coffee cup.
No, it's
And because it's slightly different, we have coffee instead of tea, basically.
it's definitely a topic that I know you know a lot about though. So,
Okay.
the brain.
Oh, okay.
How did you first get interested in the brain?
Um, I suppose it was a logical set of stepping stones in a way. Um, so I started being really interested in motivation in the adolescence because um, I was very demotivated as a teenager. Absolutely hated school, did not engage or engaged minimally and with very few teachers. Um, and then particularly, with a couple of teachers had very, very negative experiences, and the fact that I'm actually a teacher myself now is complete irony. But at one point when I was head of studies in a big school, I think I mentioned this before, I gave myself the tricky classes, including the remedials. Um, in Spain, as you know, if you fail three, it used to be anyway, if you failed 3 subjects or more, you had to repeat the year. But you did get a second chance in September. If you'd failed 3, you could resit, or maybe it was if you'd failed 2, you could resit. Can't quite remember now, but anyway. Um, so summer courses were often what they call repetidores, people repeating. And I always taught those, and I thought, well, the difference here is motivation because as soon as I walk in the room, there was just, I can't do English. And I was like, yes, you can. And it was all about showing them what they could do. And as soon as they realized that they could, then actually they did. So it was, and anyway, sitting down thinking, okay, this is obviously about motivation. So then the stuff that I did seemed to be working because my initial strategy was just to do the opposite of what I'd been through. And then I decided to get informed about it because it did seem to be working, but I didn't actually understand why it was working really. So researched that. Now that's back in the 1990s, give or take, late 90s, 2000. Um, so did a lot of research into psychology and motivation. Um, and then I'm trying to remember the dates here. So following up on that, and so a lot of if you go online, like my old blog and stuff, a lot of it's about motivation. Got heavily involved in the Dogma group. I'm sort of one of the, I don't know, nucleus members of the Dogma group. And so that, the discussion carried on there about motivation and engagement and relationships and conversation and dialogue and da da da. And anyway, and then while I was doing that, I went to some lectures, having moved back to Oxford. There's public lectures and stuff here. That time I was at Brookes, so I had access to the Brookes Library, and I went to lectures at the university, and of course, 2013 is like the big year for the MRI scans being starting to be used. um, to study neuroscience and learning and memory and all that kind of stuff. There's a bit going on before, but 2013 seems to be the big key year. Um, and then you just suddenly go, okay, I'm reading about motivation and adolescence. Um, and now I'm getting this extra information about the brain, and ooh, and so I just want more. I don't know if you're the same. You kind of have a thirst for knowledge. So I'm always reading and researching, and downstairs at the moment I've got a book called Other Minds on my table. Wait, partway through, fascinating. It's about the mind. So that's like my next. Yeah, what is the mind? Having done come from motivation to the physical brain,
Hmm. Hmm.
then the mind and consciousness. What is that? Um and yeah, it's just it's like just taking one step and another and another and kind of feels inevitable in a sense. My dad, when he was a psychologist. I mean, he's still around. He hasn't gone, but he's retired now, obviously. And so as a kid, there were psychology books in the house, but it was very Edward de Bono then. But yeah, mm. And
Cool.
I actually love it. It's what's made me keep loving my job.
Awesome. And I
Mm.
mean, you mentioned there that 2013 was a big year. I'm going to jump ahead now to 2020, which was obviously another big year. And so, now they're
Mm.
starting to do a lot of the research about how the teenagers or the preteens through that period, the effect that the pandemic had on them. Have you read anything about that and
Yeah, yeah.
the effect?
Yeah. There's loads of research on that. I was about to say last year, but it's not last year yet. 2025. We're right at the end of the year. I'm already boom into the next one. At the beginning of this year, published a position paper with Nick Thorner for OUP, and we read a lot of research for that. So 2024, there was a lot coming out. I mean, we started writing that paper sort of early-ish 2024. Um, and essentially that was 2 years after the pandemic. No, already there was a lot coming out because obviously any research has to be longitudinal. You know, pandemic only really finished in 2022. And so to measure the effect, we still, there's still studies ongoing, but
Mm,
initial research was done on like of the type where you survey essentially a bunch of students or a large number and ask them questions about preferences for studying, and now they've gone back into class, do they and one of the big areas is why blended is not actually working at universities. The dropout rate is significantly higher than it was before.
mm,
Um, and that, not just online courses, but the blended appears to be less motivating than the face to face. So yeah, there's loads of stuff going on. And then of course, um, on Generation Alpha, there's stuff ongoing as well because Gen Alpha were primary during the pandemic and are now secondary. And there's the kind of what's the effect on their cognitive development.
mhm.
I noticed that in my students, they're 19, most of them are 19, occasionally 18, but I mean, they were 13, 14 when the pandemic was at its height, which is the key social development period. And I really do notice it.
Mhm.
Mm. Particularly what last year and this year, I've noticed it. Last year, quite not quite so much. Um, yeah, and they're very different from people, I don't know, 4 or 5 years older than them.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, in what ways do you feel they're different? How do you see it in the classroom? Because you mentioned there that it's kind of a key period for that social interaction. Are you finding that they prefer working alone, or are they're veering more towards kind of pair group work because they missed out on that foundation?
Um, well, I've actually had students say to me they find that one-to-one work, so pair work, they find extremely difficult because they don't know what to say in a one-to-one situation.
Mm.
Um, and that's not just to adults, it's, and they seem to, the boys particularly, um, they function okay in group work, probably because it's easy to hide in group work, but they're not quite there yet with the one-to-one communication. That is a fairly early adolescent development thing. If you think about primary kids, they can play games in groups and stuff, but they're not good at pair work.
Hmm.
They haven't quite developed the one-to-one communication skills, and that tends to kick in the earlier part of adolescence, which with my current students is the bit that they missed, essentially.
Hmm.
And they struggle with it. They're okay in groups and they actually function very well in groups. They seem to be able to work as a biggish team and sort out issues with a biggish team better than, say, students 4 or 5 years older than them, but they struggle with the pair work thing. Not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just time. It's,
Yep. Yep.
it's
And
it's not like there's a bit missing. It's just delayed. So it's time. But it does mean that I do a lot of pair work. I increase the number of tutorials with them so they get one-to-one with me as well.
hmm. Hmm.
Um, because it's not just learning one-to-one, it's learning to do it in another language. So you've
Yeah.
got the double whammy there. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, potentially a little bit of blue sky thinking now, but what would you like to see on pre-service qualifications? So thinking about, Cert TESOL, CELTA, that sort of course, which obviously isn't aimed at teaching teenagers anyway, but what do you think in terms of learning languages in the brain, what would really benefit teachers early on in their careers?
Um, well, a passing knowledge of how the brain works in terms of the key stages of development. So, for for teachers who are going to be primary level, the fact there's motor skills and the thalamus and all that kind of stuff. And then, the as you move, I mean, to an extent, the Young Learner Certificate did this, that it split the groups into age
Mm,
chunks. But adolescence is rarely split up when you learn it, and it is actually split into three or even four chunks. In the cognitive, I mean, obviously it's a continuum, but you could divide it into three or four chunks
hmm.
and just give teachers passing knowledge of what the brain is doing at each stage so that we know what to expect of people. Like the other day, I mean, I was talking to a colleague who was getting a bit frustrated with our students about one thing and was saying, oh, well, they just need to be able to take the decision and accept that they're adults now. And I was thinking, I didn't say it, but I was thinking, well, they're not actually adults now, not yet, not fully. You can expect to hear, but not to hear.
Mm,
So
hmm.
um, I think that knowledge should be general knowledge
Hmm.
in the teaching profession. That because there is a tendency to think in terms of almost like course book levels, where you've got infants or pre-primary, and then you've got primary, you've got secondary, and then you've got adult. That's
Mm,
it. That's
yeah.
like a sort of, and it's not that at all. The secondary and young adults are just And it's the key state. I mean, we are, as adults ourselves, we went through it.
Hmm.
But so many people don't sit down and take the time to go back
Yep.
and remember what you went through and how you felt when you were 13. I don't know what it's like to be a boy, but as a girl, your body's doing certain stuff at 12, 13. It just feels so different from when you're 17.
Hmm.
But you've got other stuff going on when you're 17, and it's just. So I think that stuff needs to be overt. Um, and adults as well, discussing adults.
Hmm.
We don't nowadays we focus a lot on dyslexia and and other SEN issues, not SEN, yes, SEN
Specific
issues.
learning difficult differences.
Yes, no, my brain went, I'm talking about STEM now. Well, I'm getting confused. Yeah. Yeah, learning differences in the classroom. We focus a lot on that, but I do still think there needs to be a lot more focus on the going from child to adult
Mhm.
stage.
Mhm.
But socially, that stage didn't even exist until under 100 years ago. It's 1950s when the word teenager entered the language.
Ah, I never knew
Hmm.
that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it was the early 50s, but it was the word teenager entered then, and the concept of the grumpy teen or whatever.
Mhm.
So we're only, 75 years into accepting that teenagers exist in the first place.
Ah, awesome.
Uh,
Well, I mean, the book, Kajing, that has a fabulous first section where it has a lot about the brain in it.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
I must admit, I love that section. I really do.
so do I. I learned so much when I was reading it.
Wow. I mean, it allowed me to kind of pull together so much of the stuff that I've been reading and researching and trying out over the last 20 years, really.
Mhm.
And it's not all there either because there just weren't enough pages for it all. So there will be more in the future.
Mhm. Fantastic.
But
And there
yeah,
will be more coffee breaks in the future as well. But that brings us to the end of this one. We'll be back with our regular cup of conversations, possibly not next week because it's the Christmas holidays. So we're a bit all over the shop, but we will be
it's
back
holiday,
in
Christmas holidays for
2026.
us. Yes. Yes. And we'll be back. I forget if we're back just before the new year or just after the new year, but very soon.
We'll be around.
Exactly.
Enjoy the festivities, everyone, and we will see you in
And if
2026.
you're watching this in August, happy summer.
Bye.
Bye. See you soon.